All right, everyone get ready, because today we're going back in time, back to the 18th century, to uncover the secrets of the earliest novels.
Ooh, secrets. I like it.
We've got two really cool books to look at today,
Okay.
The Man of Feeling and The Castle of Otranto.
All right, I'm familiar with both of those.
Now, these books were super popular back then, even though they broke, like, every rule in the book.
Yeah, it's true. What makes these books so interesting, I think, is that back then, the novel itself was like a brand new thing.
Oh, wow. So, like, nobody had really done this before.
Exactly. Imagine a world without novels, and then suddenly, boom, these stories start showing up.
So they must have been pretty wild for readers back then.
Yeah, and they reflected a society that was changing like crazy.
So what kind of changes are we talking about?
Well, you've got the rise of the middle class, for one.
Okay, yeah, so more people who could actually read.
Right, exactly. And more women were reading, too.
Interesting.
Oh, and we can't forget about this obsession with sensibility.
Okay, sensibility, that's a new one for me.
It was like the buzzword of the 18th century.
So what does it even mean?
Well, basically, it's all about, like, the power of emotions, you know?
Like being super in touch with your feelings.
Yeah. It's about being moved by joy, sorrow, just like everyday struggles of people around you.
Wow, so it's like they were really tuned in to their emotions.
Exactly. It was a big deal.
And that definitely comes through in The Man of Feeling, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That book is like swimming in a sea of emotions.
So tell me about the main character, Harley. What's his deal?
Well, Harley is like the ultimate example of sensibility.
Okay, in what way?
Well, his empathy, it's like off the charts. He feels everything so intensely.
Oh, wow.
It can be really overwhelming for him.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's this one scene, like, it really shows you what I mean.
Oh, tell me about it.
Okay, so he visits Bedlam.
Wait, Bedlam, like the insane asylum?
Yeah.
Oh boy, that can't be good.
Let's just say it does not go well for poor Harley.
Oh man.
But you know what's even more interesting is that Mackenzie, he doesn't just create this emotional character.
Right.
He actually, like, plays with the whole structure of the novel itself.
What do you mean by that?
Well, The Man of Feeling, it's not a normal, straightforward story.
Okay.
It's kind of all over the place.
Like how?
Like, chapters are missing.
What? Seriously?
Yeah. And there are these sudden shifts in who's telling the story.
Whoa, that sounds wild, like a puzzle almost.
Yeah, it's very fragmented.
So how is that different from other novels at the time?
Well, back then, most novels were these, like, long, detailed narratives.
Oh yeah, I've read a few of those.
They focus on, like, plot, and character development.
Right,
But
right.
Mackenzie just tosses all that out the window.
So he's going against the grain here.
Big time. But it actually makes you, the reader, engage more deeply with Harley's emotions.
Like you're forced to pay attention to the feelings.
Yeah. And piece together his story yourself.
That's pretty revolutionary.
It is. Mackenzie was basically experimenting with, like, what a novel could be.
And people loved it.
Oh, yeah. The Man of Feeling, it was a huge hit.
I guess people really connected with that emotional authenticity.
Right. It was like he gave them permission to just feel deeply.
So we've explored the emotional roller coaster of The Man of Feeling.
We have.
But now we're switching gears to something a bit darker, right?
Oh, yeah.
The Castle of Otranto.
That's right.
Now, this is the first Gothic novel ever, right?
It is. And you know what's funny?
What?
Walpole, the author, he actually tried to trick everyone at first.
Oh, really? How so?
He pretended that his book was like a translation of this old Italian manuscript.
No way.
Yeah, he was like, oh, I just found this ancient story, you guys. Is
So sneaky. But I guess people were really into that kind of thing back then.
Totally. But then later on, he admitted that he made the whole thing up.
He came clean.
He did, and called it a Gothic story.
That's hilarious. So what is it about the Castle of Otranto that made it such a big hit?
Well, to get that, we need to talk about, like, what Gothic even means.
Because it's not just about creepy castles and ghosts.
Right. It's about, like, the darker side of human nature, the things we're scared to face.
Our deepest fears.
Yeah. And, in the 18th century, there was a lot to be anxious about.
Oh, I bet. So the Gothic genre was like a way to process all that.
Exactly. It gave those anxieties, like,
Oh.
a shape, a way to confront them through stories.
That makes sense.
And the Castle of Otranto, it's like the ultimate example of this.
It checks all the boxes.
Oh, yeah. You've got a medieval setting, supernatural stuff, and even a bit of political commentary.
Wow, it's like a whole package. And what about the story itself? What's it like?
Well, get this. The whole plot takes place in just 3 days.
3 days.
Yeah. It's this crazy whirlwind of intense events.
Like what kind of events?
Well, for example, there's this giant helmet that falls out of nowhere and crushes Manfred's son.
Oh my God.
I know, right? And then there's this creepy skeleton hermit who shows up.
Yikes. That's intense. So Walpole is really trying to keep the reader on edge, huh?
Oh, absolutely. It's like an 18th century horror movie.
And the way he writes, it also adds to the mood, right?
Definitely. He uses these super long paragraphs, no quotation marks for dialogue.
Yeah, it can be kind of hard to follow sometimes.
Right. But that's intentional.
Really?
Yeah, it's all about creating that feeling of, like, claustrophobia and disorientation.
Oh, I see. It's like you're trapped in the story.
Exactly. And you never know what's going to happen next.
Very clever. So it's not just a scary story, it's like an experience.
Yeah. And speaking of scary, we got to talk about Manfred.
Oh, yes, the villain.
He's such an interesting character, though.
More than just the typical bad guy.
Oh, yeah, way more. He's actually really complex.
Okay, tell me more about him.
Well, on the one hand, he's power-hungry and ruthless.
Typical villain stuff.
Right. But then you also see moments of, like, guilt and remorse.
Oh, interesting. So he's not all bad.
No, not at all. It's like he's struggling with himself.
Like he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he can't help it.
Exactly. And that makes him so much more interesting than just a simple villain.
I'm getting some serious Shakespearean vibes here.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There are definitely parallels to Shakespeare's villains.
So Manfred's not just a bad guy. He's like a symbol of something bigger.
Yeah. He represents, like, the darker side of ambition and power.
It makes you wonder what Walpole was trying to say about his own time period.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a reflection of the anxieties and uncertainties of the 18th century.
We're going to need to dive a bit deeper into that, but we'll save that for next time.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so last time we were talking about Manfred and how he's not just like a one-dimensional villain.
Yeah, he's definitely got layers to him.
What makes him so intriguing? What does he tell us about like the fears people had back then?
Well, he's got this inner battle going on, ambition versus guilt. He wants power. He wants to protect his family's legacy. But he's also, like, haunted by what he has to do to get it.
So it's like a constant tug of war inside him.
Exactly. And it really reflects the anxieties of that time period.
How so?
Think about the 18th century. Everything's changing. Old ways are dying out, and people are scared.
Yeah, scared of losing their power, their place in the world.
Right. And Manfred, he's like the poster child for that fear.
He's desperately clinging to control.
Yeah. And the castle of Otranto, it's almost like a metaphor for that struggle.
So it's not just a spooky story, it's a commentary on the anxieties of a whole society.
Exactly. And, it's interesting to compare that to The Man of Feeling, which it might seem like a completely different world.
Yeah, all about emotions and stuff.
Right. But it also has this social commentary running through it.
Really?
Yeah. Think about Harley, the main character. He's so out of place, so sensitive.
He's almost too good for the world he lives in.
Yeah, exactly. He's constantly shocked by how selfish and greedy people are.
It's like Mackenzie is using Harley to critique that side of society.
Yeah. Like, is this really the path we want to go down? What happened to compassion and kindness?
It's a question we're still asking today, right?
Right, absolutely. The struggle between, like, material success and actually being a good person.
It's timeless. But, besides the social stuff, I'm also fascinated by how these authors actually pull us into their stories.
Yeah, the writing itself.
How do they create these moods and feelings just through words?
Well, both Mackenzie and Walpole were masters of language.
Like they knew how to use words to paint a picture.
Exactly. It's not just what they're saying, it's how they're saying it.
So how does Mackenzie do it in The Man of Feeling?
Well, his style is very deliberate, very emotional.
Give me an example.
Well, he uses a lot of exclamation points, dashes, to really emphasize those feelings.
It's like you can hear Harley's voice trembling with emotion.
Exactly. Mackenzie wants us to feel every bit of Harley's experience.
It's very different from the formal writing style that was popular before.
Oh, yeah, way more modern, more like how we talk today.
It's like he's breaking the rules of grammar to match the way emotions can, like, break through our composure.
Right. And it's really effective.
You can't help but be drawn in.
Now, Walpole, he takes a different approach in The Castle of Otranto.
Yeah, his writing was much more challenging for me.
Right. It's more formal, more typical of the Gothic style.
But he also does some really cool things with language.
Oh, yeah. Like, for example, those massive paragraphs and the lack of quotation marks.
Yeah, sometimes I get lost in those paragraphs.
I know. But it creates this feeling of, like, claustrophobia and uncertainty.
Like you're stumbling around in the dark.
Exactly. It's like he wants to disorient you, make you feel uneasy.
And that's a big part of the Gothic, right?
Totally. It keeps you on edge, not knowing what's real or what's next.
So both of these authors are really playing with the way we read, the way we experience stories.
Yeah, they were pushing boundaries, experimenting with language to create something new.
And that's part of what makes them so important.
Absolutely. They were shaping the future of the novel.
So we've talked about the beginnings and the middles of these stories.
The emotional journeys, the anxieties, the writing styles.
But what about the endings? How do they wrap things up?
Ah, the grand finales. They're both really interesting, but in very different ways.
Let's start with the Man of Feeling.
Okay, but be warned, it's a tearjerker.
Oh, no, I'm not ready.
Poor Harley. He just couldn't handle all the suffering in the world.
His heart was too big.
It really is a sad ending.
But maybe Mackenzie is saying something about the importance of goodness, even if it doesn't always win.
Yeah, like even in a world full of darkness, empathy and compassion still matter.
No, the Castle of Otranto, that one ends a bit differently, right?
Yeah, it's more of a traditional ending, good triumphs over evil.
But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, is it?
No, not quite. There's this feeling of melancholy, like a sense of loss hanging over everything.
Like the past can't be fully erased.
Exactly. And the choices we make have consequences that last a long time.
So both novels are kind of inviting us to think about the power of the past.
Yeah, how it shapes us, even as we try to move forward.
And they remind us that literature isn't just about entertainment.
Right. It can help us understand ourselves, our history, the world around us.
It can challenge our assumptions, make us question things.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it.
So we've got these two amazing novels, both groundbreaking in their own way.
Both exploring the human experience, but from different angles.
But what about the reader today? Why should we still care about these old books?
Well, I think they offer us a really unique perspective on the past.
Like a time capsule.
Yeah, we can see how people back then dealt with change, with anxiety, with moral dilemmas.
And maybe learn something from them.
Definitely. Plus, they remind us of the power of storytelling itself.
How so?
Well, they show us that stories can be more than just entertainment. They can be ways to explore complex ideas, to challenge our beliefs, to connect with other human beings across time.
So you're saying these 18th century novels can still teach us something today?
Absolutely. About human nature, about right and wrong, about the importance of empathy.
But let's be real, these books aren't exactly easy reads.
It's true, they can be challenging. The language is different, the pacing is slower.
But you're saying it's worth the effort.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a depth to them that you don't always find in modern books.
It's like slowing down, taking the time to really savor the words, the ideas.
Exactly. It's a different kind of reading experience.
It transports you to another world.
A world that shaped our own in so many ways.
And maybe by understanding that world, we can understand ourselves a little bit better.
I think that's a great way to put it.
So we spent all this time with The Man of Feeling and The Castle of Otranto.
Two very different books, but both super important.
Yeah, and what's crazy is how they were written so long ago, but they still feel relevant today.
Totally. I think it's because they deal with, these timeless human struggles.
Love, loss, ambition, good versus evil.
Exactly. And they do it in such creative ways.
We've talked about the writing styles, the emotional stuff, but one thing I find interesting is how they both kind of mess with the idea of a traditional hero.
Oh, yeah. Like, neither Harley nor Manfred is your typical, dashing knight in shining armor.
Right. Harley is almost too sensitive, and Manfred is, well, kind of a mess.
Yeah. They're both flawed,
But that's what makes them so interesting.
Yeah, their imperfections make them feel real, like people we could actually meet.
We can see ourselves in them, even though their lives are so different from ours.
Exactly. That's the beauty of good writing. It connects us to other human experiences.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have. The emotional impact, the social commentary, the writing, the characters.
But why should all this matter to someone listening today? Why should we care about these old novels?
Well, for one, they give us this amazing glimpse into the past, into a time that shaped our own world.
It's like a history lesson, but way more engaging.
Right, and by looking at how people back then dealt with their problems, we might learn something about ourselves.
Right. It's all connected.
It is. Plus, these books remind us about the power of stories themselves.
How so?
They show us that stories aren't just for fun. They can make us think, challenge our beliefs, make us more understanding.
So you're saying we can learn some valuable lessons from these 18th century novels?
Absolutely. They have a lot to teach us about human nature, about morality, about empathy.
But I'll admit, they can be tough to read sometimes.
Yeah, the language is old-fashioned, the pacing is different,
Takes some effort.
but the payoff is worth it. There's so much richness and depth in these books.
It's like slowing down, taking your time to really appreciate a good meal.
Exactly. It's a different kind of reading experience, one that can really transport you.
It's like stepping into a whole other world.
A world that shaped our own, but that we might not know much about.
And by understanding that world, maybe we can understand ourselves a little bit better.
I think so, yeah. It's all about making those connections.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of exploring these fascinating novels.
It's been a pleasure talking about them with you.
I hope everyone listening has enjoyed this deep dive into the 18th century.
Me too.
And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire you to pick up one of these books and give it a try.
You never know what you might discover.
So until next time, happy reading, everyone.
Happy reading.